Completed the input tab page we've been working on for the last couple of lessons, and in order to test it I want to input this audio book that I created on this date, 6/20/09, and this document we're looking at is a LAD, which is a labeling assisting document that has a lot of useful information for inputting into the database. It's part of my process I call Borgifying. So in the program itself, we're looking at the input tab page, and we have our frequent authors that in this case is Harlan Ellison, which I have in the frequent author list. So I select that and it automatically puts that value in the author field, and then I select a type of short story sci-fi, because this is really a collection of sci-fi short stories, and the format of Borg is correct. And for the title, we can directly cut and paste that out of the LAD. It's Midnight in the Sunk Cat, which is actually Midnight in the Sunken Cathedral. I just made it shorter so it fit on the label better, but I'll expand it out when I actually put it into the database. Hoping I'm spelling cathedral right here. And then the box is actually a cylinder, an archive cylinder for Borgs. Z8A is the current one. I have 7 previous ones. And the number of items we can also get from the LAD, and that's 5. It was originally 5 cassettes. And now the DateTimePicker is a really interesting control. And it basically allows you to show calendars, which you can go back and forth in time in, and select a date. And it also has a nice box around today's current date. But we want to select June 20th, 2009 for the date that's on the label, so we can find the CDR in the Borg archive. And then we click the Save button to actually save this data into the database. And we get a message, rows affected 1, if it works successfully. And we actually would have got a message box popping up that said it didn't succeed. So the spirit of Kurt Vonnegut watches over the whole process. I actually had a lot of extra space over to the right, so I put in a picture box. And when we go into Visual Studio, we can see how I actually created this page. The 2 main new controls I used were the DateTimePicker from the common controls, which I just dragged over, and the radio button, which we've seen several times in the past, so I probably don't need to dwell on it. And then we have our 2 bound controls, type and format. And if we double click on the save, we see that I created a lot of internal variables that are local to the save click event, such as string str author, and that's set equal to the text txt author.text property. And I do much the same thing for the txt title and the txt box, which are pretty much just straight text boxes that I can assign to local string variables. And then for the bound controls, I need to do a couple special things. For one thing, there are combo boxes where I want to select the selected value attribute, because that has the code value rather than the displayed symbolic type. So in the case of format, I have cbx format.selected value. Then I call convert.toInt32 to convert it to a integer value. And I save it in a local integer called nFormatType. And I'm actually going to have to convert this back to a string later on, but I put it in the native integer format. I'm doing the same thing for the selected value of book type. And the reason I like it in the native integer format is that way I know I'm getting rid of extra spaces and things that might not make it look right in the database. And I also do special handling for the radio button. I have a local integer variable called nDone, and I do rad read checked. If that's equal to true, I set nDone equal to 1. And if it's not true, I set nDone equal to 0, which are the values we want to actually save in the database. And then finally, I do read of the text box for a number of items. I convert that to int32 and put that in a local integer. And then for the DateTimePicker, I get the dtpdate.text value, and I want to convert that to a datetime object. I use convert.toDateTime to do that conversion. And the reason is we want to use a specialized toString function that's a method within the datetime object. So this is our declared datetime object, dtDate. And then I call the toString using a string pattern of month, month, day, day, year, 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 which is the format we want to see it in the database. So that creates a nice string variable formatted exactly the way we want it. And once we have all these local variables assigned, I create the huge SQL statement. And you might want to just pause the system to look at this statement and study it a bit if you're really interested in the SQL. As I say, I convert much of the string the variables back to string that I converted to integer, but I feel a lot more comfortable doing it that way. And then we create our command object, and we set the command text to the str string value. And then I do something I haven't done much in the past, but I should have, which is the try catch block. And basically this says do the newBook.execute non-query, and if that succeeds, I concatenate that into the label numrex.text label on the screen. But if it fails, catch the exception, put it in a variable called ex, and then display the message property of the ex exception variable and a message box. So if this fails, it'll pop up a message box that said it failed. And if it succeeded, it'll convert the execute non-query to a string and concatenate that string with rows affected. Needless to say, that string is always going to be a 1 if it succeeded, because one record was affected. And in the past, I set this label numrex field to the SQL statement in order to debug, so I could see whether the statement looked right. And then I clear the various text box fields so that the input screen is ready for the next input. Well, I hope you enjoyed this lesson, and remember to focus and learn a lot. I'll see you in Alexa 16.